It was Monday, the start of a new accounting period at the General Motors plant. Most of our workshop was waiting for the signal to start the assembly line. The quality control department was short one person, and it seemed that we would have to reassign assistants or double the staff to make up for the shortage. Just then, the alarm sounded and we heard footsteps running behind the shelves of spare parts surrounding our station. "Wait, guys, I'm here!" someone shouted, and Trevor Martin appeared from around the corner with a broad smile on his dark face. "What's got you shaking so much, Trev? Is it nighttime again? Has it really been 3 months already?" I teased him. He laughed. "Hi, Ken. Yeah, it's time for a change of scenery again. It helps break up the monotony and lets me check out other girls." Trevor grabbed a couple of torque wrenches and a clipboard and jumped over the moving line to take his place. Trevor and I had been friends since we started working at the plant 3 years ago. We both left the Army within a few months of each other, and our overseas assignments to Germany coincided for about a year. Ironically, we served 50 miles apart but never met. I was a sergeant in an engineering unit stationed in Schweinfurt, and he was a Spec C5 tracked vehicle mechanic stationed in Würzburg. We visited the same cities, restaurants, and nightclubs. We both went through a lot of tough training in Grafenwohr and Hohenfels, suffering from the cold and snow in winter, and the heat and mosquitoes in summer. In addition, we both got married before joining the Army. My wife accompanied me to Germany, but Trev's wife did not. I met my wife Donna at a local community college. She was a year older than me and was finishing a 2-year medical technician training program. We started dating and fell in love after a couple of months. I got a low number in the draft lottery, and when it became clear that I would be drafted into the Army, we decided to get married. As luck would have it, Donna got pregnant before I left for basic training. You know how they say birth control pills are 99% effective? Well, we were part of that unfortunate 100%. I managed to get home in time for the birth of our daughter, Samantha. As soon as Sam was 3 months old, Donna and our daughter joined me in Germany. Treva's wife, on the other hand, decided to stay in the States to save money. He did take a 30-day leave in the middle of his 18-month tour, but when he returned home after being discharged, he discovered that his wife was 6 months pregnant, and all the money he had sent her was gone. He later found out that since he had left for Germany, she had been sleeping with one of his best friends. Apparently, saving money wasn't the only reason she didn't leave with him. Of course, the divorce was difficult and not in his favor. Trevor was very popular with women, but if there was even a hint that a woman was married, living separately, or even divorced because of infidelity, he wanted nothing to do with her. And if he was asked if he had ever thought about getting married again, he would simply reply, "I've thought about it, and I have bite marks on my butt to prove it." He didn't trust women very much and wasn't shy about letting them know. His relationships tended to end quickly. When we were both working the second shift, Trev and I would get together about once a week after work to have a couple of beers. When we were working different shifts, we would meet up a couple of times a month at the local American Legion Club. We mostly talked about our military service and life in Germany, our successes in school, and sometimes our problems at work. Sometimes I bragged about my wife and daughter, and Trev bragged about all the women he was dating. A couple of years ago, Trevor also became an assistant union representative at our plant. He laughed about it and said he was mainly doing it to meet all the women working on the final assembly line. Although we had a lot in common, we rarely socialized outside of work or the Veterans Club. Trevor was busy earning an associate's degree at a local community college to get into a skilled trades program, and I was studying for a bachelor's degree in civil engineering at Michigan State University. When I returned to college after being discharged from the Army, I decided to get a degree in civil engineering because of my military experience. Many engineering officers had degrees in civil engineering, and I spent much of my time on the job assisting them. I admired their skills and abilities and thought it would be a great career. However, the reality of having to support a family while attending school full-time quickly set in. The educational benefits from the Department of Defense and my part-time job were not enough. I eventually decided to attend school part-time and work nights at an auto plant. Donna stayed home with Sam until he was 2, then got a part-time job at a hospital as a cardiologist, usually working 3 or 4 days a week. Although we weren't rich, once we both started working, money was no longer a problem. Finally, I was close to achieving my goal of getting a college degree. We planned that as soon as I finished school and found a job in my field, Donna would quit her job, we would move, give Samantha a little sister or brother, and our family would be complete. We dreamed of buying or building a house in the country on a few acres of land and never having to worry about rent again. Donna was a typical blonde northern girl. Her family came from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, where many of the first settlers were from Scandinavia. Her maternal grandparents had emigrated from Sweden before World War II. On her father's side, she had Finnish roots. Donna was tall, only a few inches shorter than me, 6'1", slim and athletic. When we met, she suffered from self-doubt. This was mainly because she had been tall and thin for her age as a child and had scared boys. She claimed that she had only had 2 dates before college, but after school she gained weight and acquired grace, style, and beauty. When I met her, she was a real find. Saying that someone is the love of your life is a cliché, but that doesn't make it any less true. None of the girls I dated could compare to what we had for each other. What we taught each other about love while serving in Germany brought us even closer together. Samantha's birth was a surprise for both of us, but it was the best gift we ever received. Sam inherited Donna's blonde hair and eyes and my nose and chin. We both adored her. Donna was a good mother, and we were both looking forward to adding to our family. Most men talk about sons, but I secretly dreamed of having another daughter. I just loved hearing my little girl laugh and listen to her talk. She was absolutely adorable, and not spoiling her was a real challenge. In the evening, Trevor and I talked as we slowly walked past the conveyor belt. When it was almost time for dinner, he asked me what I was having. I replied that I had brought something with me and would eat at the table near the staff locker room. He said he would join me so we could talk about the latest news. As we sat down at the table, we started talking about school. Trevor had received his associate's degree last semester and was very happy to have finally been accepted into a trade program. He was expecting notification any day that he would be starting an apprenticeship in auto repair. I was just as excited about the news I had received in the mail from the university before coming to work today. My last elective course had been canceled because of my military experience. Today I had taken my last 2 exams, and I had passed the last exam on Tuesday, so I had fulfilled all the requirements for graduation. We congratulated each other. Trev asked if Donna was as happy as I was. I replied that I hadn't told her yet because she was at work when the letter arrived. I thought maybe I should wait until I knew I had passed my last exam and surprise her. I told Trev that I had a resume and a list of all the architecture and engineering firms in the state, as well as all the county road commissions, and I was ready to start sending them out. As is often the case in conversations between men, the topic turned to women. The last girl Trev had been dating had already left him. They had broken up a couple of months ago. Now he was dating a woman named Vicky, who worked the first shift at a paint shop. He didn't know how long it would last since he had switched to the second shift, but he didn't seem too concerned. We talked a little about the other women who worked at the plant in different departments. Who was dating whom, who had gotten married, and who had gotten divorced. After a while, Trev casually asked, "Tell me, Ken, do you still have a photo of your wife in your locker? A couple of weeks ago, I saw a woman who looked exactly like her." I replied, "Sure, but the last photo you saw was at least a year old. I have new ones now. Where do you think you saw her?" Trev paused, then said, "I don't remember, but I'll find out. Do you mind if I look at your new photos?" Like many guys, I was always proud to show off my family. I had several photos hanging on my locker door. Right after New Year's, we had our pictures taken for the church directory. The company that did the photos took pictures of us in different poses and groups, and we could choose one free photo for the directory and buy the rest. I had one with the 3 of us, one with Donna and Sam, one with Donna, and several with Sam. Samantha was only 4 years old when these photos were taken. Donna was wearing a burgundy V-neck sweater, her long blonde hair falling loosely over her shoulders. The sweater looked great on her, and although you couldn't see it in the photos, Donna had beautiful legs. Samantha was almost a carbon copy of her mother, with light hair and pale skin, and they had almost identical smiles on their faces. I didn't look too bad myself, dressed in a dark sports jacket and an open-collared shirt. My short dark brown hair and dark skin contrasted sharply with Donna and Sam. Trev admired the photos and commented approvingly on both of my girlfriends. He seemed to study Donna's photo for a few minutes before finally making up his mind. "Ken, do you mind if I take a photo of Donna? I want to show her the photo of Vicky so she can tell me if this is the woman we saw a couple of weeks ago." I guess so, but I don't understand what the mystery is, Trev. You don't even remember where you saw her, I said. I know, but Vicky remembers. I'll find her tomorrow or the day after. Just then, the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch break, and we hurried back to our places in line, and I completely forgot about the photo. The next morning, I spent about 3 hours preparing for my last exam and went to the university to get it over with. After that, I felt very good. I was confident that I had done well and eagerly awaited the results, which were to be announced at the end of the week. I looked at my watch and saw that it was still early. I had a couple of hours before I had to pick up Sam from kindergarten. It was Donna's day off, and I decided it was a great opportunity to relax a little before work. We'd been short on mattresses for the last couple of months. The assembly line was working overtime 3 or 4 days a week, and on Saturdays, it was usually 6 to 8 hours, 3 out of 4. The money was good, but it was very stressful. On top of that, I was taking 3 courses this semester, which was a huge workload. Since she worked during the day and I worked at night, we only saw each other for an hour a week, which didn't give us a chance to spend time together. I know she resented my lack of attention, but every time we talked about it, she said she understood that we were doing it for our future and that it was almost over. Indeed, for the last 5 or 6 weeks, Donna had been in a bad mood. On weekends, she was irritable, lethargic, and unresponsive to my suggestions, romantic or otherwise. As the week progressed, her mood improved, and by Thursday or Friday, she was back to her old self. This didn't help us much, as the weekends were our time to relax and get closer to each other. After a couple of weeks, I finally brought it up with her, but she just frowned and said that it was probably because of our schedule and that she would get used to it eventually, but that it hadn't happened yet. I decided to drop the subject and not press her until the end of the semester. I walked in the door and called out, "Hi? I'm in the kitchen," Donna shouted. I rounded the corner and saw Donna standing at the sink preparing dinner. On the 1 or 2 days a week when she was free, we tried to have dinner together before I left for work. We hoped that this tradition would continue after I finally left the factory and started working the day shift. I walked up behind her. She turned around and, without looking up from the sink, asked sternly, "What are you doing?" "It's my last graduation. I'm not going to school anymore and I want to celebrate a little with my wife." "What's wrong with that?" I replied quietly. She snorted. "I don't know what there is to celebrate. You still have a semester ahead of you and you're still working the second shift while I'm home alone with Sam almost every night. I'm not in the mood for a love, so keep your hands to yourself." I stopped, took a step back, and looked at her. "Donna, what's been going on with you the last month or so? What's gotten into you?" Without turning around, she replied, "Nothing." "Donna, turn around." I took her hand and turned her toward me. She turned and asked, "What?" Her eyes met mine, then looked away. For the first time, I felt awkward. This wasn't like her. "I know this is hard for you, Donna, but we're close to our goal. I've missed you and Sam so much this week, but in the end, it'll be worth it. Just hang in there, please," I begged. Donna just stared out the window with a blank expression on her face. Finally, she muttered, Sure, Ken. I'll go pick up Sam from daycare. Will you finish up?" Without waiting for an answer, she wiped her hands on a towel and left. I leaned against the counter and shook my head in confusion. What the hell? This was so unlike Donna that I was completely stunned. I thought about telling her I was done with school to see if that would improve her mood, but then decided to hell with it. Better to wait until she figured out of whatever situation she was in, whatever that was. After dinner, I played with Sam for a while. When I finally got ready for work, Donna was sitting in the living room reading the newspaper. When I walked in to kiss her goodbye, Donna put down the newspaper and said, "Ken, I want to apologize for acting like a bitch. I don't know why, but I've been on edge lately. Will you forgive me?" I sat down next to her and took her hand in mine. "Donna, you know we haven't made love in at least 2 weeks. We've never gone this long without making love unless one of us was sick. I feel like I'm losing touch with you, and I don't like it." Donna looked at her hands and said, "I know, Ken. We'll feel better when this is all over, I promise." It bothered me again that she wasn't looking me in the eye, but I took her apology as a good sign and kissed her goodbye. Work went smoothly. Trevor and I hardly spoke, and he left for his lunch break on union business. I got home at the usual time. I was so exhausted from the previous day, my last exam, the argument with Donna, and the complete change at work, that I went straight to bed. Normally, I would have read or watched TV for a while to relax, but Donna and I had had a fight. I must have fallen asleep again. The next thing I remember is the alarm clock ringing. Since I didn't have any classes, I had to wake Sam up and get her ready for school. We had breakfast together, then cuddled for a while and watched cartoons, and then I finally got her dressed and rushed to school. It was nice to finally have a whole day to myself before going to work. I took out my resume, made one entry, finally updating my graduation date, and retyped it. I was so confident that I had passed the exam that I decided to run to Kinko's and make 100 copies of my resume and cover letter. I sat down at the kitchen table and began filling and sealing envelopes for engineering firms that interested me. We consulted with Donna, and since both of our parents lived nearby, we decided to stay in the state, which still left us with over 100 options. As soon as my degree was confirmed, I would send out my applications. While I worked, my mind was preoccupied with Donna's recent behavior. It must have been yesterday's argument that triggered it. But we had argued before, sometimes worse, and I had never gotten such a reaction. I was completely unable to explain it. Finally, I finished and put the box of envelopes under the bed. I was still hoping to surprise Donna with the news of my graduation as soon as my exams were confirmed. Later that evening, the three of us had a dinner, and then I left for work. Donna was in a playful mood, which she hadn't been in for a long time, and teased me about being tired after my morning classes. Sam talked about what her friends were doing at kindergarten. Just sitting there, the three of us. I felt warm. I looked forward to this every day. I arrived at work a few minutes early and started my usual preparations. Trev came over and we chatted for a few minutes. He seemed in a gloomy mood, and I joked that he was working himself to death. He just smiled and asked if I had plans for the evening, suggesting we meet up for a beer. I thought it was a good idea, and we went back to our stations as the line started to grow. That evening, the line didn't let up for 8 hours, so we didn't get to Gino's Bar and Grill until around 11:45. Gino's closed at 2 a.m., but if you were a regular, they let you stay until 4. We always tipped the bartenders well for this privilege. We grabbed a free table and ordered a couple of beers. It was a bar for drinkers, so a jukebox played quietly in the corner and the room echoed with the sound of conversation. Trev reached into his pocket, took out the photo of Donna I had given him, and handed it to me across the table. With a serious expression on his face, Trev said, "Ken, I need to talk to you about this." I laughed and replied, "It's no big deal, Trev. I don't mind you taking it for a couple of days." Serious, Trev said, "No, Ken, I meant I didn't tell you the truth about where I saw Donna, but I wanted to show her photo to Vicky to make sure I wasn't mistaken." "Okay, so what's the deal?" Trev cleared his throat, took a sip of beer, and put the bottle aside. "Last Friday night, Vicky and I went to a club with Tony Williams and his girlfriend Vanessa. You remember Tony, right?" "Yeah, of course, you went to school together. He used to work here on Final Assembly, but he transferred to the third plant a year ago." "Yeah, that's the one. Anyway, that night we saw Donna at the club." I wondered for a moment why Trev thought this was important. Donna had a habit of going out once a week with a couple of girls from her department. I never judged her for wanting to go out sometimes. After all, I'd been working the second shift for over 3 years. They usually went out for dinner, and sometimes I knew they stopped by a nightclub for a drink. Donna hired a babysitter for Sam, but she was always home and asleep when I got back from work. "Okay, I know Donna goes out with her friends sometimes on weeknights. What's the big deal?" Trevor paused, then said, "Ken, it was at the Black and Tan." I felt my face flush and my stomach churn as I realized what he was talking about. The Black and Tan nightclub was located in a dark part of the town, on the riverfront. The police were called there at least once a week to settle disturbances. The city council tried several times to revoke the club's liquor license because of all the trouble, but the club's lawyers managed to fight it off. Despite its bad reputation, Black and Tan remained one of the most popular nightclubs between Detroit and Grand Rapids for many years. As Trev's words ran through my head, I shook my head. "No, Trev, you're wrong. Donna couldn't have gone there." Trevor looked at me sympathetically. "Ken, you couldn't have mistaken Donna in that crowd. Besides, I showed her picture to Tony this morning. He recognized her too. She was there with another white girl, long brown hair, skinny." My head was spinning. She couldn't have been there, but I knew Trevor wouldn't lie to me. He had never lied before, and he had no reason to lie now. There had to be some explanation. I tried to focus on what Trev was saying about the other woman. Long hair, dark, thin, you said? Yes, about the same height as Donna, but thin. Very thin. I started cursing. Damn it, damn it, damn it. That bitch, that worthless bastard bitch. Who? Connie Johnson Felgenhauer Wilkerson. That bitch. I suppose you know her? Yes, I know her, I replied bitterly. A couple of years ago, before we moved into the house we're renting now, we lived in a townhouse on the south side of town. Trevor nodded. Of course, I remember. Our neighbor was Connie Johnson Felgenhauer Wilkerson. She and her two children. She's about our age, but she's been married and divorced twice. That's why I started calling her by all three names. She has one child from each marriage. They're nice kids, but she didn't seem very interested in them. Almost every weekend, she would send them to their fathers to be raised. We were on fairly friendly terms with her until we got to know her better. For a while, Donna babysat the kids a couple of days a week. As far as I know, Connie worked as a cashier at Old State Bank, but I think she got most of her income from alimony payments from her two ex-husbands. She had a tendency to go out partying after work and forget to come home. A couple of times the kids spent the night at our house because she didn't come home until morning. When she finally showed up, she looked like she'd been badly beaten and was lying there wet. After that happened the second time, I told Donna that I wasn't going to do it anymore. Connie would have to find someone else to watch the kids. She sounds like she's not easy. Is that why you're still mad at her? I shook my head. I had a friend named John Preston. We went to the same school, but he was a year older than me. When I got a job at the factory, he worked the night shift assembling axles. He and his wife, Tracy, had a daughter the same age as Sam. Sometimes the four of us would get together with the kids. After the baby was born, Tracy kind of let herself go, gained weight, and stopped taking care of herself. We couldn't find any medical reasons for it, just too much fast food and not enough exercise. John and she fought about it all the time. One day, John came over when Connie was visiting. I introduced them to each other. A week later, I was coming home from work around 2 a.m., and John's pickup truck was parked in front of her house. Another week went by, and John left his wife Tracy and moved in with Connie. He told me he was in love with her and wanted to marry her. I thought he was crazy and told him so. Less than a month later, John left work early one day, came home, and found Connie in bed with another man. They had a big fight, and Connie kicked John out. His wife, of course, filed for divorce and had the marriage annulled in court. John only sees his little daughter 2 weekends a month and can barely afford to live in a one-room apartment. Neither John nor Tracy has spoken to us since the divorce was final. Damn, that's pretty awful, Ken. Yeah, soon after that we moved into the house we're renting now. I never spoke to Connie again. So how did she show up again? I replied angrily. About 5 or 6 months ago I came home from work on Friday evening at the usual time. I found Donna curled up in a ball in the bathroom. She was covered in vomit. She smelled of cheap whiskey and ashtrays. As far as I knew, she was supposed to be out to dinner with her friends from work. I cleaned up after her and put her to bed. She was practically unconscious. The next morning, I took Samantha to her parents' house, then went back home and waited for her to come into the kitchen. I jumped on her with all my strength. She was too drunk to fight back. It turned out that Connie had called her at work several times trying to get her to go out with her. She said she wanted to patch things up and talk. Donna finally decided that spending some time with her wouldn't hurt and asked Connie to pick her up from her house that evening. According to Donna, they went to several bars and Connie introduced her to her friends, who started buying them drinks. Donna had never been a heavy drinker, usually sticking to wine, and she didn't handle alcohol well. Donna said she thought she remembered smoking a joint in Connie's car at some point during the evening. The last thing she remembered was Connie helping her into the house and paying the babysitter. I shook my head. I was so angry. I yelled at her for the first time in our entire marriage. I casually told her that Connie was a bitch, a whore, and just a pain in the ass. I said I didn't want anything to do with her in the future, and if she didn't like it, we'd have to go to marriage counseling. It was the worst fight of our lives. When I finished, she was crying and said she regretted not going with her and that it would never happen again. I sank into my chair and stared at my beer. We haven't talked about Connie since, but apparently it happened again and she kept it from me. And then I realized what I had just said. By not telling me, she had essentially lied to me. As soon as I thought about it, a dark cloud descended on me. Donna had never lied to me or hidden anything from me before, at least as far as I knew. I believed we shared everything. After that incident, she always told me who she was seeing. I never thought twice about it because I always trusted her. Last Friday was no exception. She told me she was going out to dinner with friends from work. I looked up at Trev. He was looking at me sympathetically, as if he understood what had happened to me for the first time. And there was something else, something in his expression, that struck fear into my heart. That's not all, is it?" Trev nodded and muttered something about damn women. He paused for another minute and finally said, "Tony's a regular at the Black and Tan. He's probably there almost every weekend and knows almost everyone who goes there. He said Donna and this guy Connie have been there at least the last 3 or 4 Fridays, as far as he knows." I just stared at him in disbelief. "Damn, no, that can't be true." Trev took a sip of his beer and said, "It gets worse, Ken." I covered my ears with my hands and stared at the table. Thoughts were racing through my head. Did I want to know more? I sat up straight and looked Trev in the eye. "Tell me." "They've made a couple of friends." I asked wistfully. "Men?" "Yeah, and they're bad guys. They're both in their early 20s. One of them is Curtis Halleck. He works in the sorting department at United Parcel Service doing odd jobs, but he's also a small-time drug dealer. He's been arrested twice for drug possession and once for assault and battery. He's known for always carrying a knife. He was married, but now he's getting a divorce. The second guy is James Martin. He works as a security guard at a medium security prison in Ionia. In his spare time, he regularly carries a gun, which he is legally entitled to do. He is twice divorced and pays child support for 3 children from his second wife. Child support for 3 children significantly reduces his income. His first ex-wife is Tony's sister. Rumor has it that he smuggles drugs into the prison and sells them to inmates. Curtis is believed to be his supplier. He and Curtis went to school together. I was in shock. I couldn't say anything. "I'm really sorry, Ken," said Trev. "I know this is very hard for you to hear." "What else?" I whispered. Trevor looked miserable. "Curtis bragged about how they had fun with these 2 white girls, and James apparently used to date this one named Connie. He says they would sneak out in the car at night and do it. Do you believe them?" "I believe Tony. And James is his ex-brother-in-law. He used to have fun with both of them years ago. Tony hasn't thought much of James since he found out he used to beat his sister when he was married to her. But he still keeps in touch with them. Maybe Curtis is just talking nonsense, it's hard to say. But do you think there's some truth to it?" Trevor looked me in the eye. "Ken, on Friday night, when we saw them at the club, they were acting very friendly." "I'm sorry." Suddenly, tears welled up in my eyes and I got up and went to the bathroom. I sat down in the stall, covered my face with my hands, and cried my eyes out. After a while, I got up, washed my face in the sink, and stared at myself in the mirror. My face was pale and my eyes were red. Other than that, you couldn't tell that I was a man whose life, as he knew it, was falling apart before his eyes. I slowly walked over to the table and sat down. I looked at Trev and after a minute said, "I need to know for sure. I need to see it with my own eyes." Trev looked at me in shock. "That's a bad idea, Ken. You know what could happen there. It doesn't matter. I have to know. I have to know. Are you going to help me or not?" Trev just shook his head. "Damn it, Ken. You know how I feel about women who cheat on their husbands." We sat in silence for a few minutes, lost in our thoughts. Finally, Trev said, "All right, Ken. But you have to promise me you'll do everything I tell you. Can you do that?" I nodded. "Yes, it's your world. I can do that." "Okay, let me think about it, and we'll talk tomorrow at work." As we walked out the door, Trev patted me on the shoulder. "Stay calm, Ken. I know it's hard, but you can't show her how you feel." I just nodded and went home. Later, I sat in the dark living room and just thought. Eventually, I got up and started wandering around the house. I went into Sam's room and looked at her, curled up with her stuffed dog under her chin. I kissed her on the cheek and stroked her hair, saddened by a premonition of the changes to come. I walked to our bedroom and looked at Donna sleeping. Her blonde hair, scattered across the pillow, glistened in the light coming through the doorway. I looked at the face I knew so well and wondered how she could have done what I suspected her of. I felt my love change into something cold and bitter, and I wanted to scream at her and beat her half to death. I grabbed a pillow from the bed and slowly closed the door. I collapsed on the sofa, covered myself with a blanket, and stared into the darkness. The next moment, I realized someone was shaking me. Donna said, "Wake up, Ken. What are you doing here?" I mumbled something in response. She said impatiently, "I have to get ready for work. Go to sleep, and don't forget to take Sam to kindergarten." I stumbled back to the bedroom, crawled under the blanket, and fell asleep instantly. Later, when I woke up to the alarm clock, I thought about the day ahead, trying to suppress the feelings that threatened to turn into rage. I decided I needed to spend some time with Sam. I woke her up and we had breakfast. I asked her if she wanted to stay home with me today and maybe go to the zoo. She got excited and started telling me about all the animals. I hugged her and said, "Then that's what we'll do today." She asked, "Is Mom coming too?" I replied, "No, sweetie, Mom's at work today." She looked sad for a moment and said, "Well, we'll tell Mom everything when she gets home, won't we?" I laughed and replied, "Yes, sweetheart. You'll tell Mom everything when she gets home." We had a wonderful day together. It was a beautiful, sunny spring day, and we walked around the zoo holding hands and looking at all the animals. When she got tired, I carried her on my shoulders and she giggled the whole time. After that, I took her to McDonald's to eat her favorite meal. When we got home, Sam was exhausted and fell asleep on the couch watching cartoons. I started making dinner, trying to take my mind off everything that had happened the night before. By the time Donna walked in the door, dinner was ready and Sam was awake. She jumped into Donna's arms and said, "You know, Mommy, Daddy took me to the zoo today, and we went to McDonald's and everything." Donna looked at me, then at Sam, and said, "Wow, honey, that's great. Sounds like fun. I wish I could have gone." When we sat down at the table, Donna said to me, as if in passing, "You can wait until the weekend, and then we'll all go together." I looked at her calmly and said, "Donna, you remember that all you wanted to do last weekend was sleep, watch TV, and not worry about anything." Donna turned pale, then red. She turned away from me but didn't say anything. She turned to Sam to listen to him talk about the funny things monkeys do. I thought to myself, what a bitch. A little later, as we were finishing dinner, I decided to pull her chain a little. I said, "I haven't heard you talk much about Josie or Mary from work. What's been going on with them lately?" Donna looked at me from under her eyelashes. I'm sure she was wondering why I was asking about that now, since I had never shown any interest in it before. She replied casually, "They're doing the same things they always do. Actually, we're planning to have dinner together tomorrow night." "Where are you planning to have dinner?" "We haven't decided yet. Why are you interested?" "Just because. I'm just curious where you guys go." Donna listed half a dozen restaurants in town, mostly inexpensive ones with bars but no entertainment. "Sounds like you had a good time. Well, I have to get to work." I got up from the table and kissed her and Sam goodbye. As I left, Donna was still looking at me suspiciously. I waited for the line to start and Trev, as usual, ran in at the last minute and got his usual scolding from the other employees in the department. As he passed by, he said we'd talk over lunch. I just nodded, and we got to work. After lunch, we were standing with the smokers outside the building when Trev said, "I still don't think it's a good idea, Ken." I replied stubbornly. "I have to know for sure. If it's true, there's likely to be serious trouble. There can be no mistake." "You seem to have thought this through?" I nodded seriously and looked at him. "If it's true, I can't live with it." He sighed. "Okay, here's what I want you to do. Call me tomorrow and meet me in the parking lot at Gino's at 8. I'll drive us to Black and Tan in my car. And don't drink at the bar while you're waiting. You have to be sober, understand?" "I understand." He looked at me. "It's a good thing your skin is darker than your wife's. Don't shave tomorrow. The stubble will make your face look darker. Do you have any dark clothes? I don't want you to stand out. The darker, the better. And wear dark glasses. I don't care if it's night. Half the gangsters wear sunglasses anyway." I nodded again. "Do you have a dark Panama hat or a felt hat? Anything with a visor?" I shook my head. "No." "Okay, I'll find something. Tony will meet us there. He'll grease the bouncer until we get there. We'll cover you as best we can." God, this sounds like a James Bond operation. Trev looked at me seriously. "Unpleasant things happen there every week. I don't want that to happen to you. Not least because if anything attracts attention, she'll probably see you. And you'll never know the truth. We'll go inside, stay in the shadows, see what's going on, and leave. Okay?" "Okay, Trev. And thank you. I really appreciate it." "Damn it, Ken. You know how my ex-wife screwed me over. I don't want the same thing to happen to you. The rest of the night passed quickly. I returned home as usual. As unpleasant as it was, I slept in my bed with Donna. I didn't want her to think I was avoiding her on purpose. I didn't hear her get out of bed, but I remember her saying goodbye as she left for work. Soon, the alarm clock rang, and I got up to start my day. After answering Sam's call at school, I went to the university and the engineering college. I went around to my professors' offices and checked the exam results posted on their doors. I had a 2.5 grade point average and 2 Cs. Normally, I would have been a little disappointed with the 2.5, but that was the least of my problems. I stopped by the registrar's office and made sure my credits had been accepted and my diploma was ready. When I got home, I took the box of job applications and dropped them in the mail. No matter what else might happen, I was moving forward in that part of my life. I rummaged through my closet and found the clothes I needed for the evening. I put everything in a bag and loaded it into my pickup truck. Since Donna was going out for dinner, I made something for Sam and myself. Donna came home later than usual, rushing through the door and apologizing, saying she had been called to do an emergency EKG on a patient who had just been admitted to the hospital. I told her I still had time, but I couldn't miss work today. I told her that several people were out on vacation and we were short-staffed. I kissed them both goodbye and headed for the exit. I decided to go to the mall and kill some time by watching a movie before meeting up with Trevor. My mind was racing, and I don't even remember what I watched. I arrived at Gino's a little before 8, and Trevor was already there. I told him I was going to change in the restroom and would be ready in a couple of minutes. When I came back, he was standing by his car, and I asked him if I was dressed right. I was wearing a black sports jacket, a black polo shirt, and dark jeans. He nodded and handed me a black pie hat from the movie The Blues Brothers. See if it fits. It fit. He hummed and said, "Let's go." We arrived at the Black and Tan at 8:45. There were a lot of cars in the unlit parking lot. There were quite a few people, alone or in pairs, walking toward the club or crowding around the entrance. Finally, we found a spot near the very end. Trev said, "Wait here, I'll go check it out." He returned about 15 minutes later. He looked at me, his face tense. "They're here. Tony's watching them. Let's go." I tried to swallow the lump in my throat and nodded. I put on my hat and sunglasses and Trev said, "Hide your face as best you can. Try not to look up, okay?" We got in line to go in. The other people waiting to get in looked at me strangely, but I didn't say anything. When we got to the ticket booth to pay, the bigger of the two bouncers asked Trev, "Who's your friend, bro?" "He's my old army buddy. He saved my life in the army," Trev replied with a serious expression. "Damn, who are you trying to fool, Trev? You never served in the army." Trev smiled and said, Okay. He's my second cousin on my dad's side. He's the black sheep of the family and we're a little ashamed of him." The bouncer laughed and said, "Come on in. You know where Tony's sitting." We went in, and the hall was almost empty. The lights were only on around the band and the bar. The band was playing loud, heavy music, and the smoke was so thick you could cut it with a knife. It smelled of cigarettes, stale sweat, and alcohol. A large crowd had gathered on the dance floor, swaying to the beat of the music. I followed Trevor, who slipped to the left side of the room. Every now and then he would stop, say something to someone, shake their hand, and move on. I ignored the stares and mutterings, kept my head down, and stuck to him like glue. Finally, we approached a table with a couple of empty chairs where Tony was sitting and looking at us. We both leaned over and Trev said, "Ken, do you remember Tony?" I nodded and we shook hands. Thanks for your help, Tony." He just shrugged and nodded over his shoulder. "They're over there by the wall. They got here half an hour ago." Trev motioned for me to sit down so I could see them without turning my head. I looked at their table, shielding my eyes with my hat, and braced myself for what I was about to see. Damn, we were only 25 or 30 feet away from them. Donna and Connie stood out like a beacon on a stormy night in the darkest night of the year. 4 men sat in the booth, where the women stood against the wall. Donna sat next to a big guy who was at least 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighed about 230 pounds. The other guy sitting next to Connie was probably taller and bigger than me. I whispered to Trevor, "Which one is the football player sitting next to Donna?" "That's Curtis." I looked at him closely. He was well-dressed with a shaved head, a mustache, and a goatee. He was easy to talk to and was obviously Donna's boyfriend. He looked tough, but he seemed like a normal person. A waitress came over and took our order. I couldn't take my eyes off my wife. She was talking, laughing, and acting as if she were at home. Curtis had his arm around her shoulders and was whispering in her ear from time to time. In front of her was an almost empty glass of white wine. Connie was leaning against another guy, who I assumed was James. Trevor and Tony were talking to each other and occasionally making comments in my direction. I was so focused on the other table that I don't remember what they were talking about or if I even responded. Throughout the evening, men kept approaching Curtis and James, but it was obvious that they were more interested in Donna and Connie. I just sat there watching the evening go by. I could barely touch my drink, my stomach was churning. A couple of times the four of them got up to dance, and as far as I could tell it was mostly very intimate dancing. Curtis put his arm around Donna, and it was obvious she didn't mind. Trev must have noticed the look on my face because he leaned over and asked, "Are you okay?" I nodded. "If you can't calm down, I'll get you out of here." The atmosphere was heating up, and I tried to imagine that I was just watching strangers kiss. A couple of times I had to look away. My emotions fluctuated between rage and overwhelming sadness. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized the seriousness of what was happening. Finally, James said something to Curtis, and he and Connie got up and went to the door. About an hour later, James and Connie returned to the table. Connie was blushing, and there were satisfied expressions on both their faces. Curtis pulled his hand out from under the table, said something to them, and they all laughed. Donna sat down and looked around as if she didn't know where she was. Curtis said something to James and stood up. He held out his hand to Donna and helped her out of the booth. They walked along the edge of the dance floor toward the door, Donna clinging to his arm, and almost everyone in the room was watching them. Trevor leaned over to Tony and me. "We need to go, okay?" I nodded, and the three of us got up and headed for the door. I followed Trevor, and Tony followed me. The fresh air hit me like a hammer when we stepped outside. It was just in time, because my head was splitting, and I was close to throwing up everything that was left in my stomach. As we made our way through the crowd gathered at the door, Trev asked Tony, "Do you know what he drives?" Tony nodded. "Yeah, a Lincoln Town Car 4-door silver." "What else would a self-respecting drug dealer drive? He usually parks in the last row of the back lot." We walked in that direction, scanning the cars. Tony whispered, "There it is." He pointed to the right. We were standing in the shadow of a warehouse, about 4 cars away from them, and we had a very good view. They were sitting in the front seats with the windows rolled down a couple of inches. We could see the light from the joint passing from one to the other. As I watched them, I hoped that was all there was to it. Finally, the light went out, and they both seemed to be motionless. Finally, the front doors opened, and they both got out and stood talking on the roof of the car. I breathed a sigh of relief, but that sigh turned into a groan of disbelief when they both opened the back doors and climbed inside. We watched as their heads came together for a few moments, then separated. Then Donna's head fell onto his lap. I was overcome by a sudden fit of uncontrollable rage. I began to shake and took a step forward. Trev and Tony grabbed my arms, and Trev hissed at me, "Ken, no. Not here, not now." I was overcome by a sudden clarity, and I stopped trying to move. It was over. My marriage was over. The most important thing I had, the thing I considered mine, was gone. The most important thing I thought I loved, I no longer loved. There was only one thing left in my life, Samantha. We stood motionless for several minutes. We saw Donna's head rise, and they were together again. Then they disappeared from view. A few minutes later, Donna's wide legs appeared above the seats and began to twitch convulsively. I pushed Trev and Tony's hands away and said emotionlessly, "Thanks, Trev. Thanks, Tony. I've seen enough. It's time to go." Turning and walking away, I said fiercely, "My marriage may be over, but this isn't the end." "No," I whispered to myself, "it's not over." Part 2. I walked over to Trev's car and leaned against it, lowering my head, trying to keep my body from shaking. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. I wanted to be anywhere but there. Trev and Tony came over to me. Trev said, "Are you okay, Ken?" I turned and stared at them both. All my hopes, all my dreams, not to mention the only woman I've ever loved, are in the back seat of that car. "How do you think I feel?" I said bitterly. Tony cleared his throat, paused, then said, "Ken, I'm really sorry this happened. If there's anything I can do..." I looked at him and sighed deeply. "Thanks, Tony. I appreciate it, and maybe it's for the best." Donna has to leave in an hour to get me home and get me cleaned up. Do you think these two guys will stay at the bar after they leave? Tony replied. I'm sure they will. They often do that when the job is done. They like to brag to those who haven't succeeded. If it doesn't conflict with your loyalty, could you talk to them and find out what they're going to do with my promiscuous wife and her new best friend? Tony looked at me curiously and said, Sure. Ken, James has been on my blacklist since he beat up my sister, and Curtis is even worse than him. I don't owe them anything. I'll call Trevor tomorrow and let you know if I find out anything. Thanks, Tony. That means a lot to me. We shook hands, got in the car, and drove away. We hardly spoke on the way to Gino's house. When we pulled up, he asked, Want a drink? Not really. I'm going home to see when they get back. Are you seeing her tonight? Trev asked. I shook my head. As much as I'd like to just beat her up and kick her out, it's not that simple. I have to think about Samantha. I have to cut her out of my life somehow without losing Sam. Losing her would kill me. Okay, don't forget we have overtime tomorrow night. Yeah, I know. I'll be there. I can't stay home with my wife anyway. If you don't have a date or anything, maybe we can meet here at Gino's after work. Maybe I'll think of something by then. Trevor nodded. Okay, maybe Tony will think of something for me by then. Thanks, Trev. I appreciate having someone to talk to who's been through this shit. I got in my car and drove home. It was almost 1 in the morning when I parked on a cul-de-sac a few houses down from our house. Donna and Connie were coming home from the other side of the neighborhood. If the assembly line had run nonstop for 8 hours and I had driven home straight from work, I would have arrived around 2. As expected, Donna's car was still in the driveway. I already knew that Connie wasn't just sitting there because my life had turned into a car wreck. About 15 minutes after I arrived, I saw a car drive down the street and stop in front of our house. I saw Connie and Donna get out of the car and walk up the steps. I was too far away to see where they were going, but they made it to the door and went inside. About 10 minutes later, I saw Christy, a second-grade student who lived on the next street, get out of the car and head toward her house. I saw Donna and Connie standing and talking on the porch, watching her walk toward the house. A few minutes later, Donna and Connie hugged, and Donna went inside. Connie got into her car and drove away. I had a little time before I had to get home, so I decided to follow her to find out where she lived now. To my surprise, Connie still lived in the same complex where we had been neighbors. I watched her park and go into her townhouse. I drove through the parking lot and checked out her car. I wrote down the make, model, and license plate number and drove home. It was 2 o'clock, and I pulled up to the house and went inside like any other evening. As usual, only the nightlight in the kitchen was on, and everything was quiet. I turned on the TV and watched CNN for a few minutes. Finally, I walked down the dark hallway and listened to the bedroom door. I could hear Donna breathing heavily, as she always did when she slept. I went into the master bathroom, closed the door, and turned on the light. There was a faint smell of deodorant in the air. The shower stall was damp and a wet towel hung on the edge. Donna's hairdryer lay on the counter, still warm. I glanced at the trash can next to the toilet. Inside was an empty box of Massengill disposable syringes. I shivered as the meaning of what she had said dawned on me. I went back into the hallway and paused for a moment. Turning around, I went down to the basement and walked over to the laundry basket standing under the garbage chute. I rummaged through the dirty clothes but didn't find anything she had been wearing. I looked around the basement and noticed that the washing machine lid was open. I opened it and saw the clothes she had been wearing earlier in the cold water. I closed the lid and went back upstairs. I looked in on Sam, took a pillow and blanket, and lay down on the couch. I lay there and stared into the darkness, thinking. For her, it was a normal thing to do. Go to a party and have fun. Come home before her husband got back from work. Put her clothes in the washing machine and soak them to get rid of the unpleasant smell. Take a shower, wash her hair, and even blow dry it. And don't forget to spray on some deodorant to get rid of the last traces and stay fresh all the next day. And then go to bed before he gets home so you don't have to talk about what you did in the evening. It's pretty easy to do with a few glasses of wine and a couple of trips in the backseat of a Lincoln Town car. I swore I would never cry over her or our marriage again. She killed him ruthlessly, repeatedly, and intentionally. My future no longer included her. I was angry, furious, and one step away from murderous rage. I knew I couldn't go through with it. I had to calm down and pull myself together to get through this. I had to think about Samantha. I couldn't let Donna influence her. That was my last thought before I fell asleep. I woke up around 8 when Sam reached for my face. Daddy, Daddy, your face is all scratched up. Why are you sleeping here? I smiled sleepily at her. Good morning, Samantha. Are you ready for breakfast? She looked at me, hugging her stuffed puppy, and nodded. Are you going to eat with me? Of course, sweetie. I got up, Sam ate breakfast, and I turned on the cartoons for her. I went back to the bedroom to go to the bathroom. Donna was fast asleep, and I didn't expect her to wake up for a few hours. Now I understood why she had been so out of sorts for the last 4 or 5 weekends. I took a shower, shaved, and got dressed. I dressed Sam and decided to take her to her parents' house. Mom and Dad were retired and spent their winters in Florida at a trailer park. A month ago, they had just moved back to Michigan. They had an apartment in the city and a house on a small lake in the northern part of the state. They loved spending time with their grandchildren. Every fall, it was very hard for them to leave their home and children, but they couldn't stand the cold and snow anymore. We stayed with them for a few hours and had lunch. Mom asked where Donna was, and I told her she was still asleep. Mom looked at me questioningly, and I just shrugged. Mom, Dad, and Sam had a great time while I mostly sat and watched baseball on TV. Mom teased me for not paying attention, then started talking about when she would have another grandchild. My older brother already had 2 children, and I was falling behind her. We had this conversation regularly for several years. I tried to smile and told her she'd be the first to know. It depressed me to think that it was unlikely to happen. It was time for me to go to work, and Sam and I kissed them goodbye and headed home. When we walked in, Donna was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, reading the newspaper. Sam ran up to her, hugged her, and said, Mommy, we were at Grandma and Mom's, had lunch with them and everything. And stuff was Sam's favorite expression at the end of a sentence. Donna didn't smile, she just said, That's nice, Samantha. And she gave me a sidelong glance. You could have told me or left a note. I just replied, I could have, but I didn't. And I went to my bedroom to get changed for work. She followed me down the hall and asked aggressively, What the hell does that mean? It means you wouldn't have cared if I had told you. You wouldn't have wanted to go and we would have gone anyway. I said calmly, By the way, did you remember that I have to work today? I pulled on my work jeans. What? Donna looked confused by the change of subject. I have to go to work today, remember? I walked past her and called Sam. She ran up to me and I kissed her tightly and hugged her. Good night, Samantha. Be good to your mom, okay? Sam nodded and smiled, and I completely ignored Donna. I turned, walked to the door and looked back at them both. See you in the morning. And I closed the door. Donna's face reflected a mixture of anger, disappointment, and perhaps concern. Every time I left for work, I always kissed her goodbye. Now that was a thing of the past. As I was getting ready for my shift, Trev walked by and asked, How was your night? I just shrugged and replied, Pretty much as expected. I'll tell you over dinner. Okay, I have some news from Tony, too. Later, as we sat at the table eating dinner, I told him about my evening and what I had learned about how she was working on her cover. I also told him about the changes in Donna's behavior over the past couple of months that I hadn't been able to explain before. Just talking about it made me angry all over again. Trev looked at me sympathetically. When shit like this happens, you never believe that the person you loved most in the world could do that to you. He shrugged. Tony called me this afternoon. He was hanging out with some guys at a bar until closing time. According to him, he was bragging about how he had entertained these 2 women. Tony said the conversation went on for a long time. Anyway, before he left, James arranged a date with Connie for next Friday. Apparently they did. James arranged a date with Connie. Connie convinced Donna to go with her. Donna went on the date with Curtis. Connie and Donna slept together, and maybe Donna didn't feel guilty because she wasn't the one who initiated it. He shrugged. Who knows? But this time they went even further. James told Connie that they were going to get a room at the Red Roof Inn near the junction of US 123 and Forest Road. I wanted to see if Donna would agree. I think Connie just laughed and said no problem. So they planned to meet at the Black and Tan at the usual time. And when things get hot, they'll move the party to the hotel. However they do it, it's all damn Donna. Our marriage is over and she ruined it, I said firmly. Trev thought for a minute. Let me give you some advice, Ken. Listen to a man who's been in your situation. Don't let hatred and anger consume you like they consumed me. I spent years angry and resentful. Because of that, I was never able to have a serious relationship with women. But I'm starting to hope again. My life isn't over, and good things are starting to happen to me. I'm not saying you don't deserve justice, but do what you have to do for your daughter, for your own peace of mind and a healthy life, not just for revenge. Then he smiled. But if it leads to a little revenge, that's fair. I thought about his words as we drove to the end of our shift. I knew Trevor was right, and that someday I would be able to overcome the anger, humiliation, and rage. But right now, I couldn't get it out of my head. The criminals had to pay for destroying my life. Their actions had to have consequences. As I thought about everything I knew about the situation, an idea formed in my head. If I could crack this case, I could get justice. And Donna would go away, at least far enough that there would be some distance between her, Sam, and me. Later, as we sat over beers at Gino's, I began to explain the situation to Trevor. My problem is how to get Donna out of my life without losing Samantha. If I divorce her, she'll get custody of our daughter, and her influence could ruin Samantha. I can't let that happen. The only thing I can think of, other than murder, is to put her in jail or get her into so much trouble with the law that no judge would give her custody. Sounds reasonable, but how are you going to do that? I think the key is drugs. And we know where all four of them will be next Friday night. Curtis already has a record, so it looks plausible. If I can figure out how to get Donna and her friends arrested in a way that attracts maximum attention, Donna won't stand a chance of getting custody when I file for divorce. I started sketching out a plan, asking Trev to help me fill in the gaps and find inconsistencies. The best scenario I could come up with was to organize a raid on Friday night when they were all at the Red Roof Inn. The 3-county drug task force had a hotline for gathering information. I could use it to get the police involved. For the arrest to lead to serious criminal charges, I had to plant enough drugs to make it obvious they weren't for personal use. I had to plant them in any car parked near the hotel. If Donna and Connie followed their usual pattern, it would be Connie's car. If neither woman was driving, it would have to be Curtis's car. Then I would call the hotline and initiate the arrest. The biggest risk for me was not getting caught while I set them up and somehow getting involved in the subsequent investigation. And time was of the essence. Well, what do you think, Trev? That's pretty ambitious, Ken. Are you really willing to go that far? He asked slowly. I don't think there's any other way. And I want them to go down, Trev, I said firmly. Okay, I'm in. Let's start gathering evidence. We both know half a dozen people who work at the plant, but to get the numbers we need, we're going to have to pay. I nodded. I've taken care of that. Ever since Donna got her job 2 years ago, I've been putting all my overtime into a separate account at another bank. I was planning to use it for a down payment on a house or a couple of acres in the country. I wanted to surprise Donna. Looks like I won't need it now. I've got over $8,000 in there. He nodded. Okay, so there's no problem with the money. But I need help gathering evidence. If it turns out that my wife is involved in drug trafficking and someone finds out that I was buying drugs, it will raise alarm bells. I realize I'm asking a lot, but can you help me? He thought for a minute. Yes, I know 4 or 5 people who won't talk. I'll have to divide the tasks among them so that the workload is reasonable. I nodded. I think everything else is irrelevant except for one thing. I need an alibi for Friday evening, or at least part of Friday, so I can drop something off and call the police. Ideally, I'd be working on the assembly line, but if I take vacation, that would ruin my alibi. I know people sometimes sneak into the factory, but it would be impossible to cover for me at the station. And I know the foreman would notice. Trev paused for a few seconds, then laughed. I have an idea. I'll talk to the union representative about holding a union meeting on Friday evening to discuss changes to the work rules in light of the upcoming contract negotiations. The union reps always invite a few rank-and-file members. I'll ask the foreman to let you be one of the rank-and-file representatives. He won't be able to refuse. He'll have to invite one more person from other sections. The meeting will start right after lunch. You can walk out the gate as if you're going to get pizza and not come back. The meetings usually end at the end of the shift, and I'm sure I can punch your time card so no one will notice. Sounds good. I'll bring the money to work on Monday. Will you have enough time to get everything I need? Yes, I think so. Thanks. And could you make sure Tony doesn't take his anger out on James and Curtis without telling us what's on his mind? I don't want him to worry about it. Trevor laughed. I don't think he sees it as a problem, but I'll talk to him. I also want to find out what he can find out about their plans for Friday night. By this time, it was almost 1 in the morning, so we finished our beers and left the bar. On the way home, I wondered how I was going to keep my cool for another week. Knowing how Donna had mocked Samantha and me, I was losing my patience. How could she be so brazen and constantly disrespectful to someone she loved? Did she really think she was invulnerable? That it wouldn't come out somehow? It took a tremendous effort not to let her know that I was aware of her mistreatment of both of us. When I arrived home, I was surprised to find the lights on. Donna was asleep on the couch, the television was on, and 2 scented candles were burning on the coffee table next to an empty wine glass. I picked up her glass, turned off the TV, blew out the candles, and went to the kitchen. On the table, I found an almost empty bottle of wine. I poured it down the sink and went to throw it in the trash. There, I found another empty bottle. Now I had to stop and think. I had never known Donna to drink alone, let alone in large quantities. When I went to put her glass in the dishwasher, I found another dirty glass. I took it out and examined it closely. There was a clear lipstick stain on the rim. I went back to the trash can, pulled out another empty bottle, and examined it. There appeared to be a cigarette butts inside. This thought made me even angrier. I was willing to bet that Connie had come here to convince Donna to go on a date with him next Friday. I cleaned up the evidence and went to bed. Lying in bed, I thought that Donna not only liked boys, but also seemed to be addicted to alcohol and other things. One night I woke up and felt Donna sitting up in bed. I turned away from her and fell back asleep without thinking. In the morning, I woke up before 9. I got up and went to check on Sam. She was lying in bed talking to her stuffed animals and playing some kind of game with them. I left her and went to take a shower. After I got myself ready, I shook Donna several times. What? What is it? She asked, gasping. It's already 9:30. We still have time to get ready for church. What? Leave me alone. Let me sleep, she said reluctantly, and pulled the pillow over her head. Donna, did someone come to your room last night? I asked. She continued to remain silent. Donna, answer me. Who was here last night? No one, Ken? Now go away and leave me alone. Nonsense, why are you lying to me? Donna sat up in bed and shouted, Go to hell! Leave me alone. Then threw herself under the covers and covered her face. I left the room and went into Sam's bedroom. Hi, Dad, is breakfast ready? She asked. Sure you can. How are you going to get to Sunday school today? Is it Sunday, Dad? Yes, let's have breakfast, then get dressed and go to church, okay? Sam nodded energetically. Okay, is Mom going too? I tried to smile at Sam. Mom is tired, Sam. She wants to sleep. Sam thought for a minute. Dad, Mom doesn't go anywhere with us anymore. Why? I looked at her sadly and said, I don't know, Sam. You can ask her when we get home, okay? Sam nodded and ran to get her favorite cereal. After Sam's second birthday, the 3 of us started going to church a couple of times a month. Although none of us were particularly religious, we understood that Sam needed to grow up in a church environment. We found a Methodist church nearby that we liked, and it became our church, although we couldn't go there more often than we did. And since I worked nights, that minimized our attendance at any other community events. Donna didn't seem to want to participate in them without me. But Sam really enjoyed going to Sunday school, studying the Bible, and playing with his friends. Most of the services were informative, and many were simply comforting. Today's service seemed to satisfy my need for comfort. I knew that what I planned to do to those who had hurt me was unchristian. But for some reason, I felt that in time I would be forgiven. At least the service calmed me down and seemed to give me the strength to get through the days ahead. When we returned, the house was quiet. I looked into our bedroom, but the bed was empty, and I could hear the shower running in the bathroom. Sam and I were sitting in the living room, Sam watching TV and me reading the newspaper, when Donna came into the house. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her glance at me, then walk into the kitchen without saying a word. Sam jumped up and followed her into the kitchen. Mommy, Mommy. I went to Sunday school. Mrs. Benson read the Bible to us. We played. I had cookies and milk. That's nice, dear. Mommy, why didn't you go to church with us? Mommy wasn't feeling well and wanted to sleep, dear. There was a pause, and I imagined Sam thinking about the question. Mommy, why don't you go with us anymore? That's enough, Samantha. I told you I wasn't feeling well. Go watch TV, Donna said sharply. Sam slowly returned to the living room. She picked up her stuffed dog, climbed onto the couch, and snuggled up to me as close as she could. She just stared at the TV and didn't say a word. My heart ached for her. All she wanted was her mother's attention, and Donna was too preoccupied with her own affairs to notice. The last remnants of uncertainty about what I was about to do disappeared. We stayed hugging on the couch while Donna gathered something to eat in the kitchen. Finally, she returned to the living room, walked down the hall, entered our bedroom, and closed the door. She didn't say a word to me or Sam. I turned to Sam and asked, "Do you want to go for a ride with Dad?" Sam just nodded and said, "Okay." I changed Sam into his play clothes. We got in the pickup truck and drove off. I wanted to see the Red Roof Inn and the surrounding area. It would keep Sam occupied, and we would both be away from home. The exit for Forest Road was just outside of town. If you drive east from the highway, the Red Roof Inn is on the left and the Best Western Motel is on the right. The road ended at an intersection with cornfields and a horse farm on the other side. Sam was thrilled when she saw the horses and foals frolicking in the fields. I pulled off the road and let Sam get out of the car and stand by the fence to watch. While she laughed and clapped, watching the horses' antics, I took my field glasses out of the glove compartment and looked at the motel. The parking lot was partially hidden from the road by a row of sprawling pine trees. It looked like I could park at the Best Western, cross the road, and hide behind one of the pines. The hotel was a two-story L-shaped building where you could park next to your room and enter directly from the street. Depending on which room they were staying in, I could drive up to their cars unnoticed, drop them off, and hide behind one of the trees fairly quickly. There weren't many people in town that weekend, so I didn't think the hotel would be crowded. I needed to find a working payphone nearby. From a distance, it looked like there was one near the Best Western Motel office. Finally, I put Sam in the car and went to check. I put some change in the phone and dialed the information service to make sure it was working. It worked. Sam and I drove around the village for a couple more hours, looking at things, and then finally headed home. Sam was almost asleep, so I carried her into the house. When I walked in, I could smell something cooking in the kitchen and heard Donna clattering around with pots and pans. Donna poked her head around the corner and looked at us. Without looking at me, she seemed to smile and said, "Dinner will be ready in about an hour." Then she disappeared into the kitchen. I shook my head to myself and wondered if Donna felt the same way she acted. Schizophrenic. I took Sam to her room and tucked her in. She curled up and closed her eyes. I went back to the living room, turned on the baseball game, and decided to finish reading the newspaper. If Donna wanted to pretend everything was fine, I didn't mind. At one point, Donna poked her head out of the kitchen and asked, "Where's Sam?" "She's napping. She'll probably sleep through dinner." "Okay." Then she went back to what she was doing. I watched the game and read the newspaper. Donna didn't come out of the kitchen, except to set the table in the dining room. In the local news, I noticed several photos from the crime scene. They were credited to a local photographer named Dennis Thompson. He was something of a celebrity because he worked as a freelance photographer and sold his pictures to several local newspapers and magazines. One of his pictures had been picked up by the Associated Press. About 6 months earlier, our local newspaper had written an article about him. It turned out that he had been accepted as an official photographer for several police and fire departments in the county, which gave him access to places where others were not usually allowed. Thinking about him, I came up with a plan. Finally, Donna came out of the kitchen and said, "Dinner's ready. I'll go see if Sam's awake." I didn't answer. I thought she was trying to make up for being so curt earlier. She disappeared into Sam's room and didn't come right away. She returned about 10 minutes later, carrying Sam in her arms and whispering something in her ear. I saw Sam nod and hug Donna tightly around the neck. Donna sat her down on a chair and said cheerfully, "Dinner's ready." We sat down at the table, and it seemed like all three of us were playing roles. Donna pretended that everything was fine, that she was happy and content. I pretended to believe her, and Sam pretended that her mother hadn't hurt her. We talked briefly about work and school. In the end, I lied to myself. I said I would sign up for classes on her day off this week. The thought of being alone with her all day was unbearable to me. The evening passed as usual on a Sunday. We played with Sam, watched TV, and read a little. When it was time for the bed, I pretended to be interested in a movie, and Donna went to bed alone. The next day, I started preparing for the week. I decided I needed to lay the groundwork for the hotline. I went to the payphone near the 7-Eleven on the next street. Covering the microphone with a piece of gauze, I dialed the hotline number. I spoke more quietly than usual, and when the operator answered, I said I wanted to report a crime and explained how the hotline worked. She told me to choose a code word or sequence of numbers under which my information would be registered. If a reward was offered for the information, the money would be paid to the informant with that code. She also said that all calls would be recorded to comply with the law. I said, "There's a deal planned for Friday night at a motel on the east side. The buyer is a correctional officer. The seller has a record for drug offenses. I'll call back later with more information." Then I hung up. I thought they would be interested. I plan to provide additional information by phone later that week. I also got the phone number of the photographer, Dennis Thompson. I dialed his number and got his answering machine. I left the following message. I have information that, on Friday evening, there will be a drug bust at a motel on the east side, organized by the Tri-County Task Force. If you're interested, I'll call you back at 4 o'clock today with the details. Later, at the appointed time, I called him back from my home phone and changed my voice again. I left a message about the drug bust on Friday night, I said. Yes, I got your message. I contacted Tri-County, and they said they didn't have anything. I'll give them more information later. The buyer is an employee of a state correctional facility. I heard he's selling drugs to inmates. If the deal goes through, you could get some photos and material for an article. What's your name? Nice try, but I prefer to remain anonymous. Okay, if the information is confirmed, I might be interested. I'll call you back at the end of the week and let you know the details as soon as they come in. I'll call this number. After that, I hung up. As usual, I went to work. During lunch, Trevor and I met and exchanged news. I told him about Saturday night and how I thought Connie was there to set Donna up on Friday night. I also gave Trevor $3,000 in cash. I also told him about my calls to the hotline and the photographer. He laughed when I told him about Dennis Thompson. Those guys are like pit bulls. Once they get their teeth into a story, they won't let go. That's the thing. I want as much light as possible shown on Donna and her friends. I'm sure the prison guard story will generate interest. Oh yeah, there's nothing like corruption and drugs for a good story. I nodded. Maybe I can do something by Friday. Will $3,000 be enough for what we need? More than enough. I also talked to Tony last night. He told me not to worry about him. He won't lose any sleep over what happens to Curtis and James. He also said he knows where Curtis hangs out after work a couple of times a week. It's the airport tavern near the UPS warehouse. He said he drives by almost every day, and if he sees Curtis's car in the parking lot, he stops in to see what he's up to. Okay, thanks for everything, Trev. Tuesday was Donna's day off. I left around the time she got out of bed and told her I was going to the university to register. Instead, I drove to the suburbs of Detroit where I knew a couple of stores. I bought a couple of packs of paper towels and a cigarette holder. I got home just in time to pick Sam up from kindergarten and have dinner before heading to work. During my shift, I spoke briefly with Trev. He said everything was ready for the union meeting on Friday. The foreman knew I would be attending. I asked him how things were going with what we needed. He said that most of it would be ready by Wednesday evening and that there were no problems. I spent Wednesday finishing up work in the yard. I also used the day to look for divorce lawyers. I called several firms to inquire about available lawyers and their fees without giving my name. I also went to a 7-Eleven phone booth and called the Tri-County hotline again. When the operator answered, I said, "My code name is Black and Tan. I called on Monday about a purchase that will take place on Friday evening. The seller's name is Curtis Halleck. He has the discs. He drives a silver Lincoln Town Car. The deal will take place between 11 and 12 o'clock in the afternoon. I will call you back on Friday evening before 10 o'clock and give you the name of the motel, the room number, and the name of the correctional facility employee who will be the buyer." Then I hung up abruptly. Later, before Donna returned from work, I called photographer Dennis Townsend again. I repeated what I had said to the hotline. "Are you interested?" I asked. "Absolutely. I spoke with Lieutenant Mason, who is in charge of the Tri-County Task Force. Your information and what you told me have been passed on to the state police. They're very interested. It looks like they're investigating a drug case at the Ionia prison. Your buyer could be an important source of information on how they're getting there." Okay, how long will it take you to get to the area east of US 123, south of the university? No more than 20 minutes. But the task force will probably need 30 to 45 minutes to mobilize. I told him I'd call him 5 minutes before I called the Tri-County Task Force. He said he'd be ready, and I hung up. Trev came to work whistling with a smile on his face. I looked at him and said, "Something made you happy today." He laughed and said, "Oh yeah, I'll tell you at lunch." When we sat down to lunch, he said, "Guess what? Troy hooked up with Curtis at the airport tavern last night." Curtis was bragging about his latest conquest. Trev fell silent and felt awkward for a moment. "Sorry, Ken. I guess I didn't think." I just shrugged. "Don't worry, Trev. I'll admit it still hurts, but I'll get over it." Anyway, Troy told him he definitely admired his taste in white women. Curtis laughed and said that if he wanted, he could come by room 120 at the Red Roof Inn on Friday night and give it a try. What's more, he might leave the window open so he could watch what happened. Curtis seems to know someone who works at the hotel, and whenever he needs a room, he always gets the same one. It's the last room on the second floor. Troy thinks Curtis sometimes uses it for business, as well as for meeting girls. Troy told him he'd like to, but he'd be out of town on Friday night. And actually, I told Troy it would be nice if he did. I didn't say anything else to him, but he understood. I thought, knowing the room number will definitely make things easier. I checked out the hotel, and it would be pretty easy to get into that part of the parking lot and get out of there. There's a lot of cover. I paused and looked around. "What about the stuff?" I whispered. "I've got almost everything. We'll move it to your pickup after work." "Okay, I hope you were careful. I don't want your fingerprints on the stuff." I was careful. Everything is in the original packaging from the suppliers, and I wiped everything down after I got it. I nodded. I really want to get this over with. The tension at home is starting to build. There are only 2 days left. But have you thought about what will happen after? You better be prepared for questions from the police, your family, and your friends. Your story has to be flawless. I nodded. I hadn't thought about needing a divorce lawyer. But you're right. I'll think about it before Friday. I spent part of Thursday morning jotting down possible scenarios and how they might unfold, how I should react in each case. I wanted to act unexpectedly, but not be caught off guard. After work that evening, I discussed them with Trevor, listened to his suggestions, and incorporated those that I thought were appropriate for my personality and situation into my plan. I also made a list of everything I would need on Friday evening and the sequence of actions I would need to take. The last few days at home were normal but tense. I didn't try to kiss Donna goodbye or greet her as we usually did. If she cornered me, I didn't try to dodge her, but I didn't show any enthusiasm either. Donna gave me no signals that she wanted to make love, and I didn't take any initiative either. Our conversations were brief and superficial. From time to time, I thought I saw a look of confusion on her face, as if she were trying to understand what was wrong. Donna went to work every day, and Sam went to kindergarten. I picked Sam up from the school and usually cooked dinner or ordered takeout so we could have dinner together before I left for work. Every evening after work, I went straight home and didn't linger at bars. I found no other evidence that Connie was around, but I assumed they were talking on the phone. On Thursday evening, before I left the house, Donna casually mentioned that she was meeting her friends Josie and Mary for dinner on Friday night. I just nodded and left for work. Finally, Friday arrived, and I got up early and started getting ready as soon as Donna and Sam left. I rummaged through the box of hospital stuff Donna had collected over the past couple of years. I put on a pair of surgical gloves from the box she had left and set aside another pair for the evening. She had several bags with the hospital logo that she had given to all her employees. Donna used one of them every day to carry her work shoes and purse. I picked out an old bag and cleaned out the trash she had left in it. Among the trash, I found several receipts from the hospital cafeteria and deliberately left a couple at the bottom of the bag. I took the bag of medicine out of the basement where I had hidden it. I also put an envelope with $500 in $100, $50, and $20 bills in the bag. I rolled the bag up tightly, put it in my backpack, and placed it behind the seat of the pickup truck. As an extra precaution, I prepared a couple of small bags to put in the inside pocket at the bottom of Donna's bag, which I knew she never used. Then I transferred the bags to a larger bag and hid it in my briefcase. I spent the rest of the day cleaning the house. I wiped down all surfaces that could have come into contact with the bags. I dusted the furniture, swept the carpets, and mopped the floors. I collected the dust bag from the vacuum cleaner, the surgical gloves I had worn, and the bag. I put everything in a bag, took it to the 7-Eleven in the next block, and threw it in the trash. Then I changed my clothes, took a shower, and washed everything I had been wearing. I couldn't be too careful. When it was time, I went to pick up Sam from kindergarten. I sat down, played with her, and tried to relax a little. I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt for what she was going through. I knew it would be hard for her to lose her mother. I hoped and prayed that I could fill the void in her life. I returned home for dinner, and Donna arrived on time. When she went into the bedroom to change, I quickly opened her purse, took out her briefcase, and transferred the bags to the zippered compartment. Dinner went without incident. Donna and Sam were still sitting at the table talking when I left the room. I paused for a moment to look at the two of them, realizing that this might be the last time I would see them together, happy and carefree. I accepted that one of us would most likely be in jail by the end of the night. For a moment, I regretted that it was Donna who had given up everything, not me. And without saying a word, I turned and left the house. Trevor and I arrived at work about 15 minutes early. I told him about my plans, and he thought about it for a moment and said, "There's one thing you should consider. At some point, someone is going to realize they've been set up, and they're going to try to find out who did it." Yes, I know. Sooner or later, Donna will start thinking about who had access to her purse. The suspicion will probably fall on Connie or me. But I hope that by then, Sam and I will be divorced and the custody issue will be settled. If it comes down to her word against mine, who do you think they'll believe? As planned, we worked through lunch. Then Trev walked me to the parking lot. I put my backpack in his car, and we exchanged keys. As I was leaving, he handed me the Slim Jim from the foreman's office. It seemed like every week, several people locked themselves in their cars, so most foremen kept these handy tools in their offices. We shook hands, and I said with more confidence than I felt, "See you at Gino's around 2." Trev just nodded, and I drove away. It took me only 20 minutes to drive to the Best Western Hotel across the street from the hotel. I parked in a dark corner where I could see the wing of the building between the trees through my binoculars, where room 120 was located. There were two cars at the end of the building, Curtis's limousine and a blue Trans Am, which I knew belonged to Connie. I looked at my watch. It was already 9:30. I figured they must not have wasted any time getting here from Black and Tan. I put on surgical gloves, took my backpack out of the trunk, and put it on. As I crossed the street, only the cars were visible at the intersection with the highway. I hid behind a pine tree and watched the two cars and their license plates for a few minutes. The light was on in room 120, but all the other rooms on that side were dark. Crouching low, I ran across the parking lot and hid between the cars. I put my hand on the hood of the Trans Am and felt the warmth coming from it. They had been here recently. I tried to open the passenger door of the Trans Am, but it was locked. I took off my backpack and opened it. I pulled out Slim Jim and ran it along the window until I found the latch, pulled hard, and the door opened. I took the bag with my hospital stuff out of my backpack, quietly opened the car door, and shoved the bag under the front passenger seat. I locked the door again and quietly closed it. I put on my backpack and started back across the parking lot, but stopped and looked at the motel window, which was lit up. I knew it was a bad idea, but something drew me to the window. I crept along the sidewalk and approached the window. I could hear muffled sounds. I slowly stood up, and at that moment, a crack, a couple of inches wide, appeared in the curtains. I don't know if it was unintentional or if Curtis thought Troy was coming. In the dim light and through the haze, I could make out Donna and Curtis on the nearest bed, 5 feet from the window. James and Connie were lying on the other bed. Stunned, I turned around, slowly sank to the floor, leaned my back against the wall, and covered my eyes with my hands. I was in shock. Nothing I could have imagined could have prepared me for this. In a daze, I got up, staggered across the parking lot, crossed the street, and walked over to Trevor's car. I turned and looked at room 120. I cursed myself for looking through the window. I will never forget that scene. Every time I remember the woman I once loved. If I could have destroyed that building and everyone in it at that moment, I would have done it. I took a few deep breaths and remembered what I had to do next. I turned away and walked to the Best Western office and the payphone on the street. I put in some coins and dialed the photographer's number. When Dennis answered, I said, "There's a drug deal going down in room 120 of the Red Roof Inn on Forest Road. The supplier is Curtis Halleck. He drives a silver Lincoln Town Car. The buyer is James Martin. He's a prison guard at the Ionia State Prison. They're hiding in the motel with 2 prostitutes. One of the prostitutes drives a blue Trans Am." "Got it," Dennis said. How long will it take you to get there? I asked. About 15 to 20 minutes. You have 5 minutes before I call the Tri-County Task Force. Thanks, Lieutenant Mason is waiting for your call. I'm on my way. Then he hung up. I stood there, lost in thought, just staring at the road. Finally, I looked at my watch, picked up the phone, and dialed the task force headquarters. When they answered, I gave the code word and repeated what I had told Dennis, adding one detail. I said that James Martin had a gun and Curtis Halleck had a knife. Then I hung up. I returned to the station exit and walked to my car. I took off my gloves and put them in my backpack. I drove to the back of the Best Western Hotel and threw the backpack and its contents into a trash can. Then I returned to the edge of the parking lot where the hotel and room 120 were located. Standing next to my car, I had a clear view of both sides of the building from a distance of about 150 feet. That part of the parking lot was poorly lit, and I was dressed in dark clothing, so I was difficult to see. Through my field binoculars, I watched the hotel entrance and the side of the building where room 120 was located. After about 15 minutes, a car pulled up to the office and stopped. Two men got out, but instead of entering the office, they walked along the row of rooms and turned the corner toward the end of the building. One of the men stopped at the corner while the other continued toward room 120. I saw him stop at the window. He stood there for several minutes, and I thought he was watching what was going on. He was holding something in his hand that I thought was a camera. He turned and walked away. They hugged for a few minutes, then returned to the car and waited. About 30 minutes later, 6 unmarked cars drove down the road, turned into the parking lot, and turned off their headlights. About a dozen men in dark windbreakers got out. The word police was visible on their backs. I saw one officer enter the office while several others opened the trunks of their cars and took out some equipment. 2 sheriff's cars drove silently down Forest Road and took up positions at both ends of the block. The 2 men I had noticed earlier approached one of the officers and pointed to the end of the building. I decided that this was probably Dennis Thompson. About 6 officers headed toward the end of the building, followed by a photographer. 2 other officers headed toward the back of the building, and 2 more took up positions at the entrance to the parking lot. The 6 officers rounded the corner of the building and approached a window. One of the officers looked inside and pointed to the door. 2 officers with their guns drawn took up positions on either side of the door, while 2 officers carrying something between them took up positions in front of the door. The photographer seemed to have taken up a position directly behind them. Even from where I was standing, I heard someone shout, "Police!" At the same time, the 2 officers in front of the door struck it with something that sounded like an iron battering ram, and the door burst open with a loud crash. When the door swung open, I saw the flash of a camera that the photographer was holding above the officers' heads. All 4 officers rushed into the room, accompanied by shouts and screams. I heard something or someone hit the wall, and then everything went quiet. I saw camera flashes continuing to go off inside the room. The screams were replaced by cursing and shouting, and I heard a faint cry. Several more police officers quickly gathered around the room, and I saw 2 more police cars with flashing lights pull into the parking lot and stop in front of the room. Several female police officers got out of the cars and entered the room. Several more police officers began searching the town car and Trans Am with flashlights. A couple of minutes later, 2 police officers pulled Curtis out of the room with his hands cuffed behind his back. He hung his head. They put him in a car and drove away. James was let out in the same manner, but he walked on his own. He looked shaken and dazed. He was put in another car and driven away. 2 more police cars and a pickup truck marked K9 unit arrived. Several more police officers entered the room. One of them came out with keys and opened the doors and trunks of the cars. Several police officers began searching both vehicles. Finally, Donna and Connie were led out of the room in handcuffs, each accompanied by a female police officer. They were allowed to get dressed, but it was obvious from their disheveled appearance that their clothes had simply been thrown on. I watched Donna closely through my glasses as she stumbled over the threshold, supported by a police officer. I could see her very well. Never in my life had I seen such an expression of horror and helplessness on a person's face as I saw on hers at that moment. Tears and grimaces streamed down her cheeks. She blinked frequently in the light, and I could see her chin and body trembling as she tried to hold back her sobs. As much as I believed Donna and the others deserved it, for a moment I hated myself for what I had done to her. Then I remembered that scene at the motel and how she had treated Samantha and me, and the guilt disappeared. I watched as the two of them were shoved into the patrol car and watched through my binoculars as she slowly pulled out of the parking lot and drove away down the road. Stunned with horror, I lowered my binoculars and silently watched the flashing police lights disappear into the distance. I thought sadly about how uncertain my future had become. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so please subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.